Recon. I'm Clint Scott. He's Rob Bro.
That's true. No, we're talking defensive line today.
Who doesn't love a dominant defensive front? Well, Red Raider fans are hoping that's what they have with this year's group. Through the transfer portal, the defensive line could arguably see the biggest difference from last season to this season, adding 5 big portal acquisitions. 2 were in-conference transfers, adding A.J. Holmes from Houston, plus Lee Hunter from UCF. Hunter was one of 3 Red Raiders selected to the preseason All-Big 12 team, finishing as an All-Conference second-teamer last year. Tech added 1 defensive lineman from a non-Power 4 school. That was Gill Howard from Northern Illinois. Over the last 2 seasons, he has 11.5 tackles for loss, with 5 sacks coming in 2024. The last 2 of the 5 were both outside linebackers hailing last season from the ACC. Romello Height was the second-ranked outside linebacker in the portal, transferring from Georgia Tech. Then came the wave of Stanford firing their head coach. With it, David Bailey entered the transfer portal. The highest-rated recruit in the class came in mid-spring, with Bailey also on the preseason All-Big 12 team. Behind them are returners looking to make an impact as well. They'll be bolstered by Jaden Cofield, Duda Banks, Charles Esters, Terrell Tillman, and Chetta Ofili. Where the defensive line saw the most change, the inside linebackers saw the least, with positions nailed down by the preseason Defensive Player of the Year in Jacob Rodriguez and the Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year 2 seasons ago, Ben Roberts. The coaching staff saw little need for change with that group. That's not to mention exciting redshirt sophomore John Curry and experienced vet Bryce Ramirez adding depth to the room. The 2025 Red Raiders are aiming to set a standard of excellence, and the defensive front just might be the key.
I'll tell you what, Clint, there are a lot of reasons to be excited about this Texas Tech football team, but I don't know if there's any more anticipation. Wait for it. Anticipation as there is. It's going to be legend. How many references can I put in words?
You're going from Kiss from Robin Hood.
No, that's Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh.
Psych.
Oh, you went a little Tim Curry there.
And then I went to, How I Met Your Mother.
Anticipation.
Yeah.
No.
As there is on this defensive line, and it is.
How many references? How many good defensive linemen does this team have?
And it's the portal, right?
Yes.
And we've talked about the portal in the wide receiver room. Over the last 2 years, we've talked about the portal in the running backs room with Quentin Joyner. We talked about it, obviously, on the offensive line. We'll talk about it next week in the secondary. But I don't know that any room was as affected in the portal, because every starter and the first guy off the 2 deep, probably, in the interior at least, all from the portal.
And you have a couple of pieces that leave because of what you bring into the portal. And, like an Isaac Smith, I would have loved to have kept him around.
Sure, Joseph Raider.
Yeah, both of those guys would have found the field. However, it would have been his depth pieces, and it's not to say I'm not excited about some of the young guys and some of the experienced guys that you have behind, but, it was clear, the mission was clear. And you go back to Shahan Jayarajah's article, whenever he goes in depth and is going behind the scenes, and he's talking to James Blanchard, and he's getting quotes from them, like from Cody Campbell and Coach McGuire. And we were so focused on the offensive line, and there's a reason for it, that we overlooked the goal of the other side of the trenches. And until we started getting guys, and the goal was very clear, and it was to improve that unit. The defense was just so bad last year. Bad at a lot of things, and one of them, we focused also a lot on how, missing the pass rush was a lot of times. But it's not like you were dominant in the middle either. And so I think when you look at the group that was affected the most, it's clear to me, it's the defensive line, because not only did you add a starter at all 4 spots, but you also added a key depth piece when you look at your big 5 that you pulled in. And I think it's funny for A.J. Holmes. We've talked about this before on this here fine podcast, Raider Recon, which you can check out every single Thursday. Tell your friends. We were really excited about A.J. Holmes when he first signed up, because, one, he's a guy that has a couple of years, but also he's played in the Big 12, had a really good year with Houston, has all of these Power 4 starts, these Big 12 starts. And all of a sudden, he's a depth piece. And so then you start looking around the rest of the room going, you've got some dudes that can go and might be the biggest instant change of any position and group we've seen for Tech in the portal era.
And even with the portal additions, I'm very excited, as you've kind of alluded to, the returners.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were a lot of guys who've played over the last probably two and a half seasons on the defensive line. Certainly at edge. Certainly last year you were running them through there on the interior. So a lot of these guys are seasoned. Even a true sophomore in Jaden Cofield played a bunch last year. But again, the portal was just so important for the defensive line. And in particular, that late addition of David Bailey, because you think the roster's done. And you're heading into the season, probably Isaac Smith, probably, I don't know, Joseph Adedire still sticking around at that point as one of the opposites of Romello Height, and you're just saying, yeah, we're going to take as much space up as we can along the defensive line, and then Romello Height is going to be the guy to try and get to the quarterback. Well, now who you blocking with Height on one end and David Bailey on the other? Because Height has not had the prolific production that David Bailey has had, but he was highly thought of. And if you put him together with the linebackers behind him and the interior pieces beside him, and, oh, by the way, who are you going to chip?
Yeah.
You can put the tight end on both sides. You're going to leave a running back in.
What side are you telling the running back to keep an eye, especially on this side?
Yeah, you're keeping 7 to block 4 in a situation that needs it. So, yeah, I think it's really important. And we'll talk about the star a little bit as well this week and next week. But I think really Dingle, you're really playing a 4-3 over with him at the star because he is a linebacker. It's going to have to learn how to play safety, and then in a nickel package, you might put McCarty in there, and then it would be kind of a true 4-2. But 2 inside linebackers, 4 true defensive linemen, even though they're calling them outside linebackers. And I love to play some coverage, but
that's my favorite, wink position. Yeah. They're outside linebackers, wink.
Yeah, you're basically running a 2-4, I guess, technically. But I'm very excited, and I think Height is going to excel because of the people around him. And I think David Bailey is going to excel because he's an exceptional player.
And I think for Height, you could say that for everyone on the defensive line outside of David Bailey.
Yeah.
And I think if you wouldn't have gotten David Bailey, I still would have been very excited with who you have on that front. Like I said, I would have been excited with those other couple of guys sticking around and seeing what they now I'm making that trade 10 out of 10 times. But for Romello Height, the thing that stands out the most to me about him is he's already played a ton of Power 4 football. And
he looks the part.
He looks the part. He starts out at Auburn, gets the COVID season and then the true freshman season, and then goes and wins the job at USC and has a red shirt there with his first year and only plays 2 games or a game and a half, gets injured. And then starts the next year, then rolls into Georgia Tech, wins the job. He's just won the job everywhere he's been, and he hasn't been forced out anywhere. He's just left for his own reasons. And he brings 36 games that he's played in, Power 4 games. That's not anything to scoff at. And there's a reason. Those aren't just false, fake numbers of 36 games, but he was on, not to knock special teams or anything, but 27 of them were on the special teams, and now he's taking over this role. No, he's been in the trenches for 36 games in his career. And like you said, maybe he doesn't have these eye-popping numbers, but NFL scouts will give you a different opinion. NFL, if you're just going off of that, he's only got so-and-so sacks last year or over his career. NFL scouts like him. Everybody that saw him in the portal liked him. There's a reason why he was the second-ranked outside linebacker in the portal class, and there's a reason why he was a top 25 guy in the portal class. And so then you add in the mix like you're talking about and just the dominant, true proven commodity in Bailey on the other side, that's just going to make him better because I would venture to guess when you go over his film, especially his last year at USC when he's a full-time starter, and certainly last year with Georgia Tech, he was the dude that was getting chipped and the dude that was getting focused on the defensive line to not let him beat us. So you add all that together, and the outside linebackers, we could do probably a full episode on David Bailey, but let me ask you this. I mean, is this the best pass rushing duo Tech has ever had before we see them on the field?
That's high praise.
Mm-hmm.
I think potentially, sure. Probably in the last at least 15 years.
You
had like Colin Hill and Tony Jones one year combined for like 12 sacks. And I think that's pretty much the best you've been as a duo. Obviously, Tyree Wilson at times. You probably duo him with like an interior guy, though, that was getting to the quarterback, like a Jalen Hutchings or a Tony Bradford. But yeah, certainly in the last 10 years, it'd be hard to find another duo. Brandon Jackson and Pete Robertson had some overlap. And the end of Tommy, the early Cliff years, that probably rivals a little bit of it. But yeah, you're going back to find some comparable duos. And Romello Height doesn't have the sack numbers. He's got the pressures. He's been around the quarterback. He affects the backfield. So, yeah, I think if you're putting the number at, like, as a pair, 15 sacks, I think you could get there.
I don't think that's crazy. And I only ask that question because I think before we see a down, I think you're sniffing that territory. But we still have to see it work together on the field. But I think you absolutely have the chance to walk away from that. Let me ask you another question. For David Bailey specifically, what do you think he can be ranked as a standout defender on the defensive line when you think of some of the greats that have run through Tech?
I don't think the NFL will draft him as high as Tyree Wilson.
Agreed.
And Tyree Wilson had, I think, 7 sacks in back-to-back seasons, dealt with some injuries in his final year here. But he just had insane measurables. Wingspan, size, the body of an NFL defensive lineman. Not to say that David Bailey's some shrimp,
right?
But he was setting records of wingspan and whatnot. But I think certainly in the conversation of Tyree Wilson, can he get back to those Pete Robertson numbers? Pete Robertson led the Big 12 in sacks, or is it Brandon Jackson? One of those two led the Big 12 in sacks. I think it was Pete Robertson. I think you can put him up there with Pete Robertson as a single-season Texas Tech guy because he has the opportunity. Again, once we start talking about David Bailey in pure pass rush situations, he needs to win one-on-one battles. But the beauty of this Texas Tech defensive line potentially, and if you're bringing pressure from the linebacker unit or the star unit, he could win one-on-one battles in most situations. Because if you're chipping David Bailey, Romello Height's free. If you're not helping with guard center on Lee Hunter's free. If you're not helping guard center on Gill Howard, like, where are you going? I think all 4 of them can win individual battles. And maybe that lowers David Bailey's sack totals at the end. Because everybody's getting sacks. So that could be a conversation too. But I think full front, this is the best defensive line on paper in a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking like Colby Whitlock and the boys in 2008 is the last time you're like, all right, this is an NFL potential defensive line with a couple of these guys, and you have like professional aspirations from multiple guys on the defensive line. Not that Colby Whitlock wouldn't play in the NFL, but
that's what I think you're looking at, to me, expectations that have almost never been here, or at least you're going towards that territory. And just in the way of when you look across the defensive line, You don't just have the expectation to win a bunch of games, but win games in ways you haven't ever done, even with some of those guys that you listed on the roster where it really could be, hey, this is the walking off the bus guys. When has it been like the entire defensive line? That's like the step off the bus guys. And then also the production to back it up. I mean, it's hard to think of a situation where you could say that consistently. And then you mentioned, as you move into like the interior, when you get into, okay, great, you're gonna do your best. Which, by the way, David Bailey, and something else I love about this group is, it's not just like really talented one-trick ponies, but it's not just like a one-trick pony. It's David Bailey. I think Romello Height will be the same way. Really good in the run game too. So it's not just, hey, he's only a pass rusher, but you look and all of a sudden he's going after the quarterback and not paying attention. They do a draw on the running backs 20 yards down the field. But you go to the interior and you're going to do your best to take out David Bailey. Okay, here's a couple of downs where you're trying to take out Romello Height. Well, now all of a sudden you're leaving, like you said, Lee Hunter, Gill Howard, maybe in certain situations, leaving A.J. Holmes. That's going to be the cohesive, I guess, working out for everybody and everybody helping everybody is one of the standout things, I think, this year with this defensive line. And you know what's funny, too, is Lee Hunter, really the interior defensive line, I think somehow, to me, and tell me if you think this is wrong, has worked into like a sneaky important part of the class. And the only reason, I don't think anyone's saying, they weren't good gets or anything like that. Some might scoff that I even bring this up. But when you just have like the topics that we have today, we still lead off with the two guys we just talked about. We still mention, when you're talking about the team, the gets for the offensive line, Quentin Joyner, Cole Wisniewski. If you're doing just some individual guys, those are at least who I've heard the most about. And I think when you go, who have we kind of maybe gone under the radar? Bryce Pollock is certainly in that group in the secondary. But I think you can put Lee Hunter and Skylar Gill Howard for the impact that I think they will have as two guys that we haven't talked about enough.
Yeah, Lee Hunter is my number one get on the defensive side. And you're right. The pressure, the hype has been around David Bailey mostly. And obviously as a returner, Jacob Rodriguez. But Lee Hunter is an absolute difference maker. Mm-hmm. He's a run stuffer. He is a block eater. And yeah, sure, he'll help the edges.
He would tell you he's fat Steph Curry.
One
of the great quotes of all-time quotes of Big 12 Media Day.
And so I do think that Lee Hunter underrated. And Skylar Howard and A.J. Holmes are just like almost forgotten pieces.
Yeah.
And they need to come in and be good. But both those guys play that. I guess it's going to be a 3 technique outside the guard, and I think it's a three technique and a 1 technique. I think it'll be an A gap, the nose guard for Lee Hunter, and then a 3 technique. So I do think that there's going to be a lot of impressive play from these defensive tackles. But I think if you look back at the end of the year and say that guy's an absolute lock for first team, I might even go Lee Hunter above the other two just because he's been doing it in the Big 12.
Yes, Big 12 second-teamer last year. Obviously, if you're going who are the 3 guys that lead that conversation, it's the 3 guys who are on the preseason team, right? It's Jacob Rodriguez, Lee Hunter, and David Bailey. I would probably do a coin flip for who I would expect between Hunter and Bailey. But at the same time, I wouldn't disagree with anybody that would pick either one if you said, which one do you think has the better chance? The good news is we're talking about them in that way.
Yeah.
And, we talk about the quarterback pressure that we're hoping to get and the sack numbers we're hoping to get from your outside linebackers. But all 3 of those guys you brought in are rare interior pass rushers. And Lee Hunter, good news for him. He's been doing it in the Big 12, like you said. Good news for A.J. Holmes with his, I think it was like 26 pressures last year, 8.5 tackles for loss. Which, by the way, his numbers last year for A.J. Holmes led the 2027 draft-eligible interior defensive lineman. And then Gill Howard, who I think, even though he's going to be above Holmes on the depth chart, I think of the group, clearly the most to prove, just because you have the Northern Illinois jump. But still, PFF loved him. Top 10 interior defensive lineman, 29 pressures last season. It's impressive and scary to be an opposing quarterback just to see how these guys are thought of and how these guys are rated, even through the interior, like the position we haven't really been talking about. I guess we have some. We have the nickname QB Hunter. It should be talked about some, but it's like we say the name and then we just bypass it.
Yeah.
I think the full attack from whoever of that combination is on the field is something that can be, and you need it to be, devastating.
Devastating is a good word. I think you have all the potential there. And again, that's just the portal guys. I think due to Banks coming off the injury, can be a guy now. I thought he really flashed early last year. And I think he was a big piece missing from your late run. And I'm very excited about Jaden Cofield as a guy who was kind of forced into action last year. And I think he'll be one of those guys that through 4 years he just kind of forced himself onto the field and he never got to redshirt him.
If I went, there's two different levels of your depth pieces when it comes to the returning guys. You have some of your older ones, Charles Esters, and Terrell Tillman, who came on late last year and all of a sudden looked great. Can you continue that trend? That's what I think they're expecting with the depth chart. And like you mentioned, due to Banks, who's just been injury-plagued the last 2 seasons. So I still don't think we've gotten our best look at him. So those are your older guys who you expect to make an impact. And then if you go to the younger guys, like you said, Jaden Cofield on the interior, and then a couple outside guys, Chetta Ofili. And another one forgotten is Dylan Spencer. I think maybe a little bit of a mystery. You could probably put this with Ofili as well. But for Spencer, missed all of last year with an injury, and he was a guy that was supposed to step in and be a difference maker, and now he'll come into a redshirt sophomore year and be in a much different spot on the depth chart. But I would highly doubt that the coaching staff's expectation has changed a lot. We just haven't got to see it. And then Chetta Ofili, I mean, a big-time consensus 4-star recruit. He's coming into a redshirt freshman year. He feels like a wild card, too. If he can start seeing the field, I think that's a good thing because it means he's forcing, probably Dylan Spencer, too, he's forcing his way onto the field as a young guy. And it's also good to have those guys be believed in because for most of the names we talked about, outside of Holmes, it's a 1-year deal. I mean, they're coming in to make an impact in year 1, and then they're done.
Yeah, and can, Tillman and Ofili and Spencer and Rigsby and Esters and Smith, can those guys provide quality snaps in the second and third quarters on first, second, third and short, rundowns, and then run those David Baileys and Romello Heights out in the fourth quarter and the third quarter on 3rd and 15 in those obvious passing situations? Can Cofield, can Anthony Holmes, or even behind Anthony Holmes, due to Banks or Keyshawn Williams, can those guys provide quality snaps so you don't have to be Tony Bradford and Tyree Wilson and Jalen Hutchings on that defensive line that played 800 snaps out of 1,000?
Well, that's supposed to be part of the benefit of how this roster's built, right? Is a lot of those names, what did they get last year? Meaningful snaps. As either young guys or guys that weren't expecting to have those meaningful snaps due to injury. And, a big point of this roster is to be able to lean on those guys when they're called upon and when you need them and to be fresh legs or, barring an injury, you're not just, the whole defense is ruined now because Romello Height went down or Skylar Gill Howard went down. There's a huge hole. It's not supposed to be as big of a drop-off as it was last year when you saw some of that stuff.
Do you want a bit of a hot take?
Yes.
I think Texas Tech has had frontline starters, Big 12 championship level defenders, at least 8 deep since probably into the Matt Wells era. like back to Jordan Brooks. It's the problem that they've only had 8 some years, 11 some years, maybe 12 some years, where that gets you in trouble. And when Chapman Lewis returns, you have, let's see, I think 5 safeties that are quality Big 12 players. You've got 4 quality Big 12 inside linebackers. That's filling 2 positions. I think you've got 3 confident corners right now. We'll see what the rest of them can do once they get out there. How many is that? 8. 11. That's 11 right there. And you haven't even mentioned the probably 7 or 8 quality defensive linemen in 4 positions.
Yeah.
So you've had frontline Big 12 championship level talent under Joey McGuire. Can you have second line, third line Big 12 championship level talent under Joey McGuire? I think you do defensively.
I think Cincinnati is a great example of this.
Sure.
Because you look at some of the guys that they've had, not just like Dante Corleone, but they've had good linebackers, they've had some good cornerbacks. The problem is, since they've entered the Big 12, they've had 0 depth.
Yeah.
And with it comes 5-7, 6-6 type records, right? And I think that you have been a step above that, but it's still the same thought process. When you don't have a second line that you can trust, or even inconsistent play from the first line that might be up there, but doesn't always play like a Big 12 champion defender, which I think in the argument doesn't make you a Big 12 champion defender, but that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
Is a lack of looking at the line behind you and then inconsistent play on top of it.
Let me ask you this. If you took out the top player on each of the 3 levels, but we'll focus on the front since that's what we're doing today. So if you took out David Bailey and you took out Jacob Rodriguez, do you think this is a quality defense still?
Yes.
Not elite, but quality.
It is personnel-wise.
Certainly quality.
Yeah. The one thing, yes, on paper, yes, I won't get into the side tangent
Sure.
I was going to get into.
If you took out, let's take out your best pass rusher, David Bailey, your best interior, Lee Hunter, and your best linebacker, Jacob Rodriguez, even if you're taking those 3 guys out, this front 7 is still competitive with most of what you've put together for the Big 12.
I think it's what you have behind you, it's still a good defense. I think you're clearly leaning more now instead of from the front end to the back end where you're flipping it and saying, hey, secondary.
Well, even if you took away Bryce Pollock and Pollock and you took away Chapman Lewis, who's already out for the first half of the season, like, even if you took out your 5 best players, one at each level, like, I still think this is a quality Big 12 defense, certainly improved from last year, and that's without the 5 best players, and that's just not something that you could have said at Texas Tech. Like, take some of these defenses. Let's take out Tyree Wilson and Jalen Hutchings and Muddy Waters off that defense and Rabbit. And you're like, ooh.
You're Oklahoma State.
That's a big gap.
Oklahoma State from last year.
Right? That's a big gap. So I think the depth, like great Big 12 teams, you have the front 11, the starters on defense that are great. But I think if you took the second 11, the 2s, you'd be a quality Big 12 team. And I think you could do that with this year's defense.
I'm not saying this to like compare the 2 schools, but when you looked at what set Oklahoma apart for years,
and
it's
Texas,
the bodies on bodies on bodies, and then what set Texas apart their last couple of years, bodies on bodies on bodies, and just guys that can go. Maybe not guys that are going to be all Big 12 level when they get called upon, but guys that can go, and there's not a big drop-off. And then when you add in together the front ends, they're tiring out, especially like from this conversation, tiring out on offensive line, and all of a sudden, youngster Ofili comes in, who's got a lot of room to grow, but all of a sudden, that's going to help him out too. So I do think that that's been a big difference. And you can look at Kansas State's defense for years. Now, I don't necessarily think that they've had all of this high-end talent run through there, but what do they have? They have a lot of guys that can go and a lot of guys that do their job. And so that's the next step with this.
Iowa State, too, that's just plug and play.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like outside of like,
I think some of that system too, but
sure,
absolutely.
But and with part of that, you pair this up with Gill Wood, and this should be like a match made in heaven, a perfect marriage of big time talent and a proven system that can turn things around quickly with what we saw with Houston last year.
Well, let's go specifically to the linebackers, and then we'll get back into is this front the best front in the Big 12? So Jacob Rodriguez, preseason Big 12 Defender of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. Ben Roberts, freshman All-American. I think he struggled last year, certainly in pass defense. It's not really his skill set. I think he was out of position quite a bit.
I think he got hung out to dry.
And I think he was asked to do things that he should have been asked to do.
Totally agree.
And some of those highlights, like I think it's TCU, you just see Ben Roberts chasing Savion Williams down the middle of the field. It's like, well, yeah, he's closest to him. But A, if that was his guy, that's DeRuyter's fault.
Yeah.
Whoever else called that. And B, like, Savion Williams ran away from a bunch of guys. I can't really blame him for that. But, like, the ACU game, they're just running crosses and drags and just wearing Ben Roberts out. So if he can get back to just doing what he's good at like he did in his freshman season, that's run defending. And, again, I think this interior clogging up guards and centers is going to be a lot closer to what he had as a freshman with Bradford and Hutchings. I think Ben Roberts can get back to what he was. So I think Jacob Rodriguez and Ben Roberts, especially if you're talking about Curry as well, because I think those are your top three. I would put those against most other linebacker duos, trios. And then Bryce Ramirez is a spiritual leader. I think he's moved positions quite a bit. He's been around the program. He's a program guy. He's wearing number 3 for a reason.
Yeah.
And he's also another one of those guys that I think if you put him in the right positions, he will excel.
All right, so I'm going to start circling back to Ben Roberts. Because one of the things I hated that we've heard a bunch is Ben Roberts got exposed last year. Now, your whole defense got exposed last year.
Yep.
Yes, you go from Ben Roberts to who we saw as a freshman play really well, pick up a Freshman of the Year award in the conference, to last year where the numbers, by the way, the tackle numbers were still good. At the things he was good at, he was still good at.
Yep.
It was your entire defense that, and also the situations that he was put in did not help him out. So for one, I look at Roberts. The first thing that you noted, I think you're going to have an even more helpful front, and he had a really good one his freshman year. I think that's going to be even better. So that guy is still there. So if he got exposed, why didn't he get exposed his freshman year when he was younger? Yeah. Now, the big takeaway from it is, though, okay, well, hopefully the coaching staff and Roberts did look at some things that he needs to work on. By the way, only a sophomore last year. Yeah. And hopefully he takes some steps with that. And if he has to do some of those things again last year, it's not as drastic.
Right.
Maybe it's something that could even turn into something good. I don't know what his ceiling is with that, but hopefully we don't have to find that out as much because the pieces around him in the defense is better. Yeah. Gill Wood, you got to also know your guys. And I don't think that always worked out last year. Part of it, injuries, part of it, youth, whatever you want to say. Either way, it was blatant that it did not always look good. In fact, when it didn't look good, it looked bottom of the league bad. Can you fix some of those things from the coaching staff? Can you use your guys a little bit better? And then you jump from there to mention John Curry next. Man, it feels like he has turned into that most mentioned guy. There's one you look at every single year. Dingle was also that. John Curry feels like he's moving into that, and we've heard about him now for, I would say, a year and a half. It's not like he wasn't mentioned at all his true freshman season where he redshirts, but you weren't expecting to see him really at all. At least from the defensive side, because Jacoby Williams and Cam Dickey had been that on the offensive side as well. But now for John Curry, who has made a big impact, by the way, last year. I mean, your best special teams coverage guy, and it wasn't close. Ends up 7th on the team in tackles with not really seeing the defensive side of the ball very much. I mean, he saw it some, especially later in the year. But John Curry feels like this guy that is built up to have a high ceiling, local kid, really, really talented. You're going to get a better look at him this year. So if he's anything close to what Coach McGuire and what the staff has described him as, there shouldn't be that much of a drop-off, and there really should be it's your next guy, right? Whenever Rodriguez leaves, whenever it's, him and Roberts. Could have been him and Roberts this year, depending on the decision that, Rodriguez had in front of him. Obviously very glad that he decided to come back. But I think, something we've heard about is, we didn't have to touch the inside linebackers as much, right? And part of that is you see Jacob Rodriguez come back, and James Blanchard has noted that. It's like, all right, well, when we're building this roster, there's something we don't have to worry about. I wonder what they would have done if Jacob Rodriguez had decided to move on and go to the next level. Would it have been, all right, all of a sudden now we do need to find the next guy? Or are they confident enough in John Curry to say, all right, this is how we're going to shift things. Here you go, kid. Which, by the way, they have another freshman, Goldwace, in the class that I think they're very high on as well. And so would that just move him up to the John Curry role? Or, how do they handle it? Bryce Ramirez, you're going to do something a little bit different than we thought. I would have been curious to find out how they would have handled that. Yeah. And I wouldn't have been just incredibly nervous about it. Obviously, bringing back your quarterback of the defense and a guy who can be an All-American type of guy, Jacob Rodriguez, obviously that's not a bad thing.
And I almost look at Rodriguez as a portal addition because there was that retention. Mm-hmm. And it did feel like a win to retain him. So in that respect, I do think it's pretty big. But that's an interesting point. I wonder if he had left, do you go get a frontline guy or do you just kind of backfill and get another body, maybe a younger guy or a guy who started at a lower level, maybe another FCS linebacker that you could pull in and provide depth.
I think you would have added a piece.
Yeah.
But I'm asking the same level, thing you're asking is what direction are you going with that piece?
Right. Are you adding a starter or are you adding depth because you think you have two starters?
So I think the linebackers, if I said that they have the lowest floor of any group.
The highest floor.
Sorry, highest floor. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah.
If I said they could suck, right. That they had the highest floor of any position group on the roster, would you agree with that?
On the roster?
Throughout every position group. Let's start with the defense.
Sure.
Let's start with the defense.
No, yeah, I would say that, yeah. Out of everybody, yes, I agree.
Because obviously that's what I think.
I was just thinking, my qualm, right? My thought process was, I feel like we know what Baron Morton provides. Mm-hmm. Because I think even if his floor is just under what he did last year, he's dependable even through injury or hurt because he was still playing through it. But I would say that the linebacker's floor is even higher than that because I do think you're going to have solid play and a bunch of tackles, and I think some of that is the defensive front allows them to have a higher floor. Mm-hmm.
That's why we lump.
So yeah, I would say
that's why these are two together because they, some
I don't think people
some might
that
ask
all the time.
Some might ask why not just do the inside linebackers by themselves? But this is such a cohesive group that is supposed to work together. That I'm with you. I think we separate them and don't understand. Sometimes one unit can look a little worse if one is just bad.
Right. By the way, if you're playing college football 26 and you want a defense more similar to Texas Tech than what they give you, so you don't have to do all your subs and flip Jacob Rodriguez because they gave you the 3-3-5 tight as the main defense, switch it to 4-2-5, and then put Mike Dangle as the starting strong safety and Brennan Jordan as the second strong safety, and you'll have Dangle as the guy closer to the line of scrimmage and Brendan Jordan in the back, or Chapman Lewis, however you want to do it. I think I had him, and then I just left Chapman because at free safety because Cole Wisniewski's not in the game.
Really?
Yeah. Not that I saw.
I didn't pre-order it, so I'm still on the wait right now.
Yeah, so that's like if if you want to line up Texas Tech's defense closer to what they'll do, it's in the game of 4-2-5, and that's so you don't have to do all the sub packages. And
Can I ask you a really important question?
on the game.
Uh-huh. If Cole Wisniewski was in the game, that's alarming. Why? Anyways,
So maybe he opted out. I don't know.
who knows? If Cole Wisniewski was in the game and you had everybody available, would you not play Chapman Lewis until he was available in real life?
If
It's integrity.
If we were
It's
doing-
integrity, Robert.
now listen to this, if I was doing like an online thing with, like legitimately with Raymar people, double
Uh-huh.
T people, and we're trying to get as close to reality, and everyone else is kind of, hey, this guy's injured, take him out, kind of thing. If everyone's doing that,
Mhm.
then yes, I would turn off injuries on the game, and I would update injuries as we move in reality, and bench a guy. Otherwise, no. it's a game.
I'm just kidding. I was just asking.
And there are some I do.
You're just on the mic with somebody I just want you to know how much I care.
I'll do Heisman dynasties. I'll do freshman dynasties. If I stink for a week, I'll go back to varsity and do a varsity dynasty and play a season.
No, I'll go back to practice
I'm
mode.
all over, man. I'm having fun with the game. Now I will play on Heisman if we're playing each other, but
And that's where you make your mistake. You're just playing for fun.
yeah, that's
College
always
football
been-
26 isn't supposed to be fun,
Yeah,
from what I
that's-
hear. College
that's
football
always-
25 was not fun.
I'll say one of us has thrown controllers and the other one hasn't.
Name 5 times. Name 7 times. You know what the best thing? You know what needs
You
to come
generally
back?
throw them down though. I've played with
I
guys that throw
dropped
them at me.
them aggressively. The best thing
I think
that...
I used to skim across before you broke our window one time, didn't
No.
it? Not you. It's a different guy.
Honestly, I didn't break a
No,
window.
no, it was not you.
I wasn't ever really near windows the direction I was
Right,
aggressively dropping the
Yeah.
controllers. The best
You're
thing...
a couch hitter too.
Never.
Like a nice slap
couch.
on the arm of the couch.
Knew what it did.
Yeah, for sure.
The best thing that was ever made, and I wish they would... I would totally... Well, actually, I don't need to be this way anymore. But in my professional days of playing video game football, was the... I think it was on the GameCube. That's what I had it on. Maybe PS2. It was the Nerf controller. It was the Nerf brand, but it was the controller.
Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah, you can
as a
whip that
junior
around.
higher, oh man, I threw it just for fun. Not
Was it
even.
the N64?
No, I didn't have a. This I'm
It might
pretty.
have been the
I'm
GameCube.
pretty
Probably
sure.
the game. I don't remember a PS2 Nerf controller. I was
Maybe it
missing
was
out.
the GameCube.
I was missing out.
That was the systems I jumped from, so I know I had
Yeah.
it in between the two, but now I'm forgetting which one it was.
I took a trip to Austin with a couple of buddies, and we were playing. I was 18. It was like freshman year of college. We drive down to Austin for fun. We're playing PS2, so it's still corded controllers, and I'm just whipping this guy. He generally beats me, and I'm just taking him to town. So I'm releasing some frustration on my end,
Yeah.
and I'm also letting him know that I'm beating him. He grabs that controller and tries to throw it at me, but it stays connected to the game, and so it just goes like this, right in front of my face. Right in front of my face.
It's like a tetherball.
Yeah. I was like, you want to finish or?
It's laying around over there.
Turn it on. I was like, we're not turning this off. I'm beating you. You're gonna say I didn't beat you if we don't finish.
Okay.
Anyways.
Before we make people rage
Do
quit,
you think this is the best defensive front in the Big 12?
Yes, I do. I think. By the way, I think the
In
big,
real life?
Sorry. No, I think it is because, and by the way, the Big 12, this is part of the image that they try to find. Part of the image that they get knocked on is like, you've got little wimps on the defensive line, or scrawny little string beans, or the
Especially
linebackers
in
are...
the ACU game,
Yeah.
people were already commenting
Yes.
it last year.
Or the linebackers are a bunch of farm boys, but they don't know like
Yeah.
technical stuff. Like that's just what the Big 12
Yeah.
gets thrown at them, which is inaccurate. I think when you look up and down the Big 12, I think you have some salty groups and some really good groups and some really well coached groups. I think, Iowa State Their defensive line, I think, will be really good, especially Dominic Orange. He is a stud. I think Kansas State's linebackers are really good. I think Arizona State is evenly good at all three levels. But all in all, I don't think anybody in the conference, when you're looking at D-line and linebacker combo, I don't think anybody has your front six, front seven, depending, whatever, on the defense as to what you do. And I think that there's also a reason why the preseason Big 12 team checked 3 boxes, right? Outside, interior, and linebacker. And like I said, for what it's worth, I think that there are some really good defensive fronts. All of those schools I just listed, Baylor, Utah, BYU, they're going to be really good in that department. And then you also have like a Kansas or a Cincinnati, again, going back to Cincinnati, where you have a couple of standout guys that could play on just about any roster in the country, but maybe not overwhelmingly great when you look up and down and look at it as as a whole or in total. But when you start listing those schools, do you notice a trend?
They involve the word state.
No, not all of them did. No, those are
they're top.
They're
performers.
top half betting favorites in the league,
Yeah.
and there's a reason for that. And
Yeah.
this is a reason why you attacked this front seven or wanted to improve it.
Yes.
But yes, I think overall, sorry, it's a long-winded answer to say yes. I think you have the best defensive front in the Big 12. I don't think it's like head and shoulders above the rest, but I think it's the best.
Until the dust settles and you're better than Iowa State at the end of the season, I'm not prepared to say that. And there's the other schools you mentioned, K-State in particular. Utah, defensive line. Dominic Orange, Dante Corleone, Lee Hunter, probably the 3 best interior defensive linemen.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Potentially, though, I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say it's the worst.
We're going in different ways. I'm reserving judgment to be proven wrong until we start playing games, brother.
So I just need to see it, because I've been excited about Tech defenses before.
Yeah.
And I've not been proven correct. Now, I was really excited about Texas Tech in 2023, offense and defense. I drove to Wyoming.
You did.
By myself. Met up with some people, but I drove all the way there and back by myself. And that defense gave up 26, 27 points a game. Now, I thought they lived up to the hype. Without Jacob Rodriguez for a long stretch of time.
Yeah.
And Ben Roberts was pretty good.
I would think that I would absolutely say that they did.
And I think this defense is so much better top to bottom. Now, I think Rabbit is a huge loss, even 2 years out, as an Arizona Cardinal last year. Like, if you could put Rabbit on this defense, I know he's a safety. I know we're talking front seven. But I would put these 2 interior defensive linemen against Jalen Hutchings and Tony Bradford. I would put these 2 edges certainly against Miles Cole and whoever the other guy was in 2023.
That's who didn't live up to the hype on the defense.
Was Tyree Wilson still there in 23?
No.
No, he left in 20. He was here in 22. He was just here 1 year with Joey.
Your outside linebackers didn't live. That was the group that was.
Oh, it was the Data Ray.
Was built up.
The Data Ray had to start that season.
And the numbers just weren't there.
Yeah, he didn't get to the passer enough. So, I mean, I think, again, we talked about it last week. If you can be better than 26 points a game defensively, I'll be happy. As a lifelong Texas Tech fan who has commiserated in a bunch of 65 to 55 wins and losses, I'm very excited to just see a competent defense. And I think this front is more than competent. And I'm a little more reserved on the secondary. That I wouldn't have any trouble at all saying this is a top 5 defensive front in the Big 12.
This is kind of...
At all. This is zero reservations there.
This is kind of strange territory for me because I have always been I reserve judgment. But I think part of it is it has to be this year.
Yeah.
If you're going to have double-digit wins, if you're going to get to Arlington, if you want to dream a little dream past that, if you're going to be in the college football playoff, this unit has to be in that discussion, and they have to play that way. Otherwise, it's going to be 8 wins, 9 wins again. And I think the offense, you asked this question on air the other day, what unit do I think, what unit do you think will be better, the offense or the defense? And as good as I think the offense can be, it has to be the defense. These are where your experienced, seasoned pros that you have added to the roster are, where you have more youth on the offensive side and a little more unproven but talent on the other side. It needs to be the defense, and I think it starts with the guys that we've talked about in this episode. So it is strange to be here because usually I'm of that ilk. Don't build things too
Good
high.
word. Good word.
Don't build up things too high until you see it. Something else, just a side note from that defense a couple of years ago, that speaking of this one that I think will also benefit this defense, speaking of the offense, 2 years ago is your quarterback injury hell, where it's just guys going down left and right.
You were 6-6 because the offense scored less than the defense gave up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think that you could have some games where you're able to maybe control it a little bit better offensively. And I'm curious to see what, you're bringing in a very aggressive offensive coordinator. You're bringing in the choice routes and choice offense for the receivers and the deep threats and stuff like that. I don't think anyone's going to complain if you're scoring 4-play drives, things like that. We want explosive plays. You need explosive plays from the offense. But I think when you're thinking of even just the play count helping out the defense offensively, I think that you'll get a little more help from your offense than that unit did a couple years ago.
Yeah, I'd like a few 12-play drives.
Mm-hmm. Flex the muscle.
Sure. Yeah. I've got a question for next week. I'm gonna make it the fan question of the week. I'm a fan.
Well, I'm a fan.
Next week.
First time, long time.
I'm going to email it to you right now so I don't forget it.
Your fan question of the week, perfect transition. We had this question, which, by the way, if you would like to give a question to Raider Recon, you can do it on Double T973's Twitter. You can do it on our Twitter. If you see us in person, you can just say, hey, Raider Recon guy, I have this question for you this week. We usually pull ones that do pertain to the episode, and I thought this was an interesting one, because it wasn't so much about the defense, but how does the impact of Jacob Rodriguez's return compared to Tahj Brooks last season?
Jacob Rodriguez's return.
Rodriguez's.
Rodriguez has a lot of hype coming in. I think he's very important. But I think if you were playing games without Jacob Rodriguez, I think the defense would be maybe not as good, but survive.
That's kind of what we just talked about.
I think going into last year, if I was thinking preseason about Tahj Brooks missing time, I would have curled up in a ball and cried. I mean, there's no website touting records that Jacob Rodriguez can set this year. He's not handing out poker chips at preseason Big 12 media days. Probably on the
Do we hand those out though if Tahj Brooks doesn't get as many carries his first couple of years? This was a question that's all for naught. If it was just the one, which was a great year, if you just had the year before,
if the record's not,
we're probably. I'm not saying we shouldn't have pushed him or anything like that with that stuff.
Well, yeah, the record was the whole reason.
That's what I'm saying, but because Rodriguez hasn't had the snap count to get to that. Just devil's advocate. Sorry, keep going.
Sure, but I also think the guys behind Tahj Brooks last year is a big reason too. Because obviously Jacoby Williams and Cam Dickey I'm a fan of now, but true freshman and Cam Valdez who is injured and you just if Tahj isn't playing running back. And coming off the season you had the year before, I think Tahj probably preseason is a much bigger factor just in my answering of the question. Now, if you get into the nitty-gritty, it's probably a lot closer. But I think macro, 3,000-foot view, 30,000-foot view if you want to get even higher, like a real plane.
I'm afraid of heights. I don't like that.
7-foot view on a steps ladder. I think that Tahj is a bigger impact. Was a bigger impact heading into the last season.
Is the step ladder OSHA certified?
Yep.
Okay.
There's a little handle.
I'll get up on that ladder. I do think it's Tahj Brooks.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I think it's a lot closer because if I were to, if this were classic debate and you were just assigned a side and I was assigned Jacob Rodriguez, the first thing I would say is a big piece of why you were able to start going around and getting some of the pieces you were able to focus in on is because you knew you didn't have to worry about that. You didn't have to worry about what Jacob Rodriguez brings to the table. But I also think that there's a big thing to say for him when we're saying quarterback of the defense. I think that gets thrown out way too much. I think that's one of those overused sayings, but he really is that, and something that is going to be interesting, maybe more so for the offense, but when you add so many new pieces, you have to have someone that can gel things together. You have to have someone that can help with the chemistry, set the expectation for the team, and then also just be a good standout player. Again, going back to could be All-American level linebacker. That's Jacob Rodriguez, and to have that is rare in college football. So I do think it is close, but I'm with you. I probably just, again, like what we had talked about a little bit ago with, if he wasn't there, I would still feel really good about the defense. I'm with you. I would have been legitimately worried about the offense last year.
Player on player, mano a mano, Juan on Juan. I think it's very close. But this defensive front versus that offensive line, this linebacker unit versus that running back unit, I mean, there's a fairly wide gap when you start considering all of it.
Yeah. There we go.
But I don't want to lessen Jacob Rodriguez's potential impact.
It's funny. He might be able to pick up better honors than Brooks did as a running back. I'm honestly kind of expecting that out of Rodriguez. But at the same time, impact is the key word there. Yeah. So, all right. Well, any final thoughts from Robert?
No.
Perfect. This has been Raider Recon. Next week, we do move back a level. We will go to the secondary. You're ready for interceptions and pass deflections and pass breakups and also some dingle talk.